When I do re-ranking videos, I typically don't like to go through my first playthrough back playing the Pokemon again, since I've done my first playthrough in the initial video release. For Dragonair, I made a video a long time ago, and then I came back and I replayed this Pokemon. My memory of it from the first time around was that it felt a lot worse than I thought it was going to be. And second time around, for my sort of first playthrough, I want to go through this playthrough so that you can get a sense for how I was feeling going into the optimization process for this Pokemon. For base stats, Dragonair has 61 HP, 84 attack, 65 defense, 70 speed, and special. It has a 13.67% chance to crit in Generation 1. As a pseudo-legendary, it has a bad growth rate, slow, which really is one of the things holding it back. The other is the fact that its starting learn set is just not very good. Wrap, Leer, and Thunder Wave. It does give it solutions to everything in the early game, but not fast solutions. And I rank all of these Pokemon based on speed completing the game. Through level up, it gets agility for badge boosts at only level 20, which is very convenient. Then beyond that, it gets some other stuff which is less useful. Slam, Dragon Rage at 45, which is way too late, and then Hyper Beam at level 55. It's a powerful normal type move that doesn't need to recharge if you knock out the opponent in Generation 1, but in an initial playthrough, it's pretty risky unless I'm 100% sure about the damage ranges. I think there are better normal type options to fall back on. Body Slam, Takedown, and Double Edge. I am using the recoil moves now. Plus, we do have access to Horn Drill. This move has actually seen significant use in my red version series against the champion. I think it might be useful here today with Dragonair. Beyond that, Bubble Beam, Water Gun, Ice Beam, Blizzard, Thunderbolt, Thunder, Fire Blast, and Surf. But remember, there's no move deleter in Generation 1, so once I teach Surf, I cannot get rid of it for the rest of the playthrough. So obviously this run is going to be better than the last time I ran Dragonair. That's just because I've learned a lot in Pokemon Yellow. And one nugget of wisdom that I've picked up over the years is the fact that training against the bug catchers in the forest is not usually the fastest way to get through the early game. If you're fine with accepting blackouts, then you simply battle the mandatory bug catcher at the end of the forest, head into the Pewter City gym, and then fight the junior trainer over and over, defeating the Diglett, blacking out to the Sandshrew. In Yellow version, this is more efficient than it is in Red version, just because the Sandshrew does not have Sand Attack in this game, it's a lower level. That means it can't waste your time just spamming moves that don't damage you. It's going to consistently knock you out with Scratch. The only issue with a strategy like this is if your Pokemon can't knock out his first Pokemon on minimum battles. But in this case with Dragonair, even though the Diglett is outspeeding, I'm still able to wrap down the Diglett in enough time. My goal with these blackouts is pretty simple. I want to continue until Dragonair has 24 speed, enough to move first against Brock's Onix. From there, I think Leer and Wrap will combo together well enough to give me a win against the first gym leader. And I was right. It takes me 6 blackouts to get to level 10, where Dragonair has 22 speed. I fight the junior trainer again, defeating him this time around, but Dragonair doesn't quite level up to 11. I backtrack, battle 2 wild Pokemon, this levels it up to 11, and it does have enough speed to move first against Brock's Pokemon. So let's try him now, this should be enough. The main thing I need to be careful about in this fight is just not running out of uses of Wrap. It has a total of 20 PP, so it is fairly limited, although it only deducts 1 every turn when it's selected, not every time it hits the enemy Pokemon. If that was the case, I think this move would feel almost unusable. Still, Brock's Pokemon have decent HP, and Wrap is only doing 1 damage per hit if I don't lower his defense stats, so Leer is going to be critical here. Unlike in Red version, Brock's Pokemon are 2 levels lower, so Geodude does not have Defense Curl, meaning I can spam Leer as many times as I want and lower its defense. I just don't want to take too much damage from his initial Pokemon, so I choose to only go to -3, and then I use Wrap to knock it out. This leaves Dragonair with 12 hit points by the time the Onix comes in. Now, things are a little bit sketchy here, because my health is so low. Also, Onix goes for Tackle right away. It does a lot of damage with a critical hit, bringing Dragonair to only 6 hit points. So I guess I should just try and trap it with Wrap and slowly knock it out. One thing I should note here is if I miss and Onix chooses Bide, which is exactly what happens, every time I select Rest, it's only going to accumulate 1 damage into Bide, so I could choose to just continuously spam my attacking move and then take some damage in return, but with my health being this low, I think using Leer reactively is the better play. This is why I had 6 6 blackouts to the junior trainer to ensure that I could do this against Onyx and I wasn't going to be moving second, because then I would attack into it and continue to take damage from Bide, even if it's just a small amount. Right now, with the outspeed, every time Onyx chooses Bide, it's essentially just a free time for me to use Leer, dropping its defense further so that Wrap will do more damage. Still, the Onyx has outrageous defense. I get it to -4, and from there I just finish it with the normal type move. However, I only have 3 PP left, so it was still a close battle. On Route 3, the going is slow. There are 4 trainers here that are mandatory. You get to pick between the Bug Catcher or the Lass. In this case, I decided to go up against the Lass because PP is limited using Wrap, plus backtracking to Pewter City to reset her position is advantageous because I want to stop by the Pokemon Center one more time to ensure I make it by the final Bug Catcher without having to use Struggle. Depleting the PP on 3 moves is never going to be faster than just walking back to the center quickly. Inside Mount Moon, a bunch of things change. First of all, by the entrance, I can pick up the TM for Water Gun, which comes just a little bit too late in all of these Pokemon Yellow playthroughs. Then throughout the rest of the cave, I do some optional training. The Super Nerd, as well as the Hiker. He's really fast because I have access to Water Gun. The fight against Jesse and James is actually kind of sketchy. Dragonair still doesn't have particularly good moves. And then the Meowth gets a critical hit with Bite, which is the same type attack bonus move in Generation 1, and it is physical. It does a lot of damage, leaving Dragonair with only 14 hit points. I'm using Wrap on the Coughing, hoping that it won't attack, but I miss. I'm taken to 10 hit points. Alright, kinda sketchy. I run out of Wraps, so I can't trap it anymore. I go for Water Gun, which does not KO. Coughing uses Smog. Dragonair goes to 5 hit points, and luckily I don't get poisoned. I knock out their final Pokemon, and I've earned myself the right to move into Cerulean City. So first, I want to go up against Misty, because defeating her with Dragonair will give me access to Bubble Beam for Route 24 and 25, which for most Pokemon will speed up their progress. There are some exceptions which I've noticed lately, like specifically Goldeen in Pokemon Red. There was no advantage to getting Bubble Beam first. It still took roughly the same number of turns to get through all of Route 24 and 25. It was about 4 turns different, and that was just not enough reason to fight Misty and chance a bunch of resets. But with Dragonair, I think it will be worth it. So I'm going to teach Bide in the place of Leer, and then go up against the second gym leader. Dragonair is slower than both of her Pokemon currently with only 35 speed. However, I can work around this by using Thunder Wave to paralyze her Pokemon. Once I've done that, then I can just wrap away and knock out the Staryu essentially for free. I did miss once and take a hit of damage. This isn't the biggest deal in the world though, because Starmie, with good AI, is never going to choose Water Gun or Bubble Beam, even though they would do more damage to Dragonair when compared with Tackle. It's going to be alternating between this move as well as Harden, or she's going to use an X-Defend. When I'm using Bide, it's really annoying if she spams Harden or X-Defend. Luckily, she only has a small % chance to use the X-Defend, and I did paralyze the Starmie first, just in case this battle gets bad, and it does get bad. I'm brought to 8 hit points, so I have to resort to Wrap to knock out her final Pokemon. Luckily for me, it doesn't miss along the way, and I'm able to finish the Starmie off. These fights with Dragonair, they've been really close. Brock, Jesse and James, and now Misty? Is the rival in Cerulean City going to be as bad? Well, no, I have Bubble Beam now. This should make him more consistent. The Pokemon that's usually the scariest on his team is the Sandshrew because it has Sand Attack, but Dragonair scores a critical hit with Bubble Beam and that easily knocks out his Ground-type Pokemon. Rattata takes 2 hits, and the Eevee takes 3, which is a small acceleration there due to 1 critical hit. It would have taken 4 otherwise. Okay, as we watch all of the footage of Nugget Bridge, I want to go through all of these damage ranges specifically so you can see how much of a difference Bubble Beam makes. This way we can evaluate the choice of fighting Misty earlier into the playthrough, although I don't think there's much downside for Dragonair since it resists the water type moves. The Dragon type is actually pretty good defensively in the early game. Okay, trainer number 1, the Bug Catcher, 42% chance and 58% chance against his 2 bugs with Bubble Beam for a one-shot, so there is a chance that we have the same number of turns as we would with Water Gun, but there's a lot of upside using Bubble Beam here. Against the last, Bubble Beam 2-shots both of her Pokemon, whereas Water Gun would 3-shot. The same scenario is the case against the youngster. Bubble Beam's 2-shotting the Ekans and the Zubat, and Water Gun is 3-hitting. But the Rattata is essentially unchanged, with Bubble Beam having a small advantage being a 15.9% chance to 1-hit, whereas Water Gun is an 11.6% chance. Dragonair has to score a critical hit. Now the following last is a trainer who's regularly very annoying because the Pidgey likes to survive, use Sand Attack, and then the Nidoran female is actually quite bulky. Bubble Beam 2-shotting both of these Pokemon is a big advantage over Water Gun potentially in a really bad scenario 4-shotting the Nidoran. Although that's really unlikely, it has a 98.9% chance to 3-shot. I played this run back in February and I have no idea why I'm using Wrap here. That just doesn't make sense. The Mankey's a 2-hit when it would be a 3-hit. The same is true for both of the Pokemon on the Rockets team. I fight the Hiker for optional experience. Here, the Machop also would have been a 3-shot. And that brings us to the final trainer of the route, the Oddish Lass. I could use Bubble Beam here. It is superior to Water Gun against the grass types, but obviously Wrap just makes more sense. I think all of that proves that Bubble Beam is saving a lot of time throughout this section of the game, so I will continue to fight Misty first in my next playthrough. By this point in the run, I have learned Agility. My moveset is Bubble Beam, Wrap, Agility, and Water Gun. On the SS hand, I pick up the TM for Body Slam and I teach it in the place of Water Gun. I want to keep Wrap around just as a last resort until later into the game when I'm sure that I don't need it anymore. Today I will be playing slightly risky, skipping Rest. So let's fight the rival again. This time around, he's just as easy as he was before, so he's not going to be causing any problems until much later into the game. Alright, time for Surge, the man, the myth, the legend himself. He's absolutely terrible. I'm going to set up here first turn with Agility to ensure that I can outspeed the Raichu. That way I can use Wrap as a fallback if Body Slam is not doing well, or if I get hit by something like a critical Mega Kick, and I have very little health left over. Remember, the Yellow Surge does not have good AI, so he's randomizing all of his moves, which means he can choose Thunderbolt. You can see that interaction play out here, where he's going for the resisted move on the second turn he has in battle. Now let's talk about a really funny interaction. After one use of Agility, my Dragonair has 98 speed. I use Body Slam and I paralyze the Raichu, cutting its speed to 16. Then Surge chooses an X speed, boosting its speed to exactly 97. One below my speed, so I'm still faster. Plus, he overwrote his turn, so he's not going to attack again. I use Body Slam one more time and Raichu faints. The prize for beating him is the Thunderbolt TM, and I can teach this to Dragonair. The question is now the right moment? I could overwrite Bubble Beam, but I don't really like that choice since it has good type coverage throughout the cave. I am going to need an option for the self-destructing Hiker after all. I could overwrite Body Slam, but I think all of you will understand why that isn't a good choice. Body Slam is a great move in Generation 1. Agility, of course, is going to give me badge boosts later on, so I want to hold on to that. So really my only choice of something to delete at this point in the run is Wrap. And I chose to do it now to have access to the powerful electric type move. Wrapping Lass. Okay, does Body Slam one-shot her Oddish? And the answer is no, allowing it to go for Stun Spore. This is why I call her the Wrapping Lass, because now the Bellsprout will see that it cannot inflict a status condition with either Poison Powder or Sleep Powder, meaning it's only going to resort to using Growth or Wrap. Growth will trigger a glitch, causing my Paralysis debuff to be reapplied to my current speed, and Wrap will constantly hit as long as my Dragonair is slower than the Bellsprout. This can waste a lot of time, and it can cause losses in the worst case scenario. However, I can play around Paralysis because of Agility's interaction with it in Generation 1. Instead of modifying your current speed, it modifies your original speed, so by simply using Agility, I can boost my speed back up to 98 and then move first against the Bellsprout and not be caught by Wrap. I love when I have a strategic option against her that isn't just resetting and trying again. Okay, so coverage in the tunnel is fantastic. Bubble Beam for Cubone, Thunderbolt for Slowpoke. The grass types can be annoying, but the status condition Junior Trainer in general does not cause as many problems as the Wrapping Lass. Self-destructing Hiker is simple with Bubble Beam, and so that leads us to Celadon City. With the slow growth rate, I think exploring the Rocket Hideout is the safest place so that I have access to one more rare candy. Inside the department store, I can pick up the TM for Ice Beam, which is a fantastic move throughout the mid-game as well as in the late game. At this point, Bubble Beam has served its purpose. It's really only good against Giovanni's Rhydon or Rhyhorn from this point out, but as you'll know, those Pokemon are not very good. Ice Beam with special damage will do enough to probably one-shot them once I arrive at those battles. For now, I think Ice Beam's better than Bubble Beam, plus it gives me coverage against Erika's Pokemon, and I thought I might as well fight her now. Tangela's first. I'm going into this battle poisoned. I figured I just didn't want to get hit by Sleep Powder. That would be really annoying. But I was wrong about that because the Weepinbell and the Gloom are both going to be spamming Acid because they see that all their grass moves are resisted. Dragonair has unfortunate damage ranges here. It's just barely not able to two-shot the Weepinbell, giving it time to lower my defense with Acid and then hit one more time, knocking Dragonair out, giving me my first reset. I didn't expect this to come against Erika, but maybe all of the previous battles in the playthrough should have been my my warning. Things have not necessarily been going really well for Dragonair, despite the fact that it hasn't had a fault that wasn't intentional up until this point. I don't think Erika is the correct trainer to battle right now, so I'm going to backtrack out of her gym and try something else. The only other option for me is the Rival in Pokemon Tower. This is definitely the better choice for Dragonair. One-shot the Furo, two-shot the Magnemite, one-shot the Shelter, one-shot the Sandshrew, and two-shot the Eevee, assisted by a little bit of luck with a crit. Agatha Jr., the question is, how much damage does Ice Beam do? And the answer is half, which is convenient. Two-shotting both of the Ghastly is not ideal. They can still confuse you and paralyze you with Lick. However, in this case, I make it through on my first attempt. On repeated playthroughs though, this is a spot that I'm probably going to want to save just for safety, because Dragonair is not going to be able to get a better damage range against her Pokemon. Jesse and James at the top of the tower are simple for Dragonair. Let's head to Cycling Road next and do some optional training. The Grimy Biker, the Wheezing Guy, and the Biker Boss. They're all really efficient experience, and that levels up Dragonair just a little bit more. I think at level 32 I should be able to backtrack to Erika and fight her now. The additional levels gives me a two-shot on the Weepinbell so that it's not as scary, and then the Gloom that follows is always just a little bit weaker because its attack stat is not as good. And all it's doing is spamming acid, so Erika's easy this time around. I now have to make a critical choice for this playthrough. Do I go to Silph now, do a bunch of training, and then potentially defeat the Rival? Or do I go to Koga and earn myself the speed boost and the ability to use Surf outside of battle? Fighting Koga and opening the way to Blaine has a couple advantages for Dragonair. Number one, if we're able to beat Blaine, then we also get a special boost, which helps so many Pokemon against the Rival. We also gain access to the Fire Blast TM, which is sometimes useful against his team members. Although in this case, solving the Cloyster with Thunderbolt makes way more sense than using Fire Blast. That's a strategy that only fire types should have to resort to. The second benefit of fighting Koga is that we would get access to all of the training along Route 21, which is very efficient because the trainers have a lot of fully evolved Pokemon, and Dragonair's Thunderbolt is going to do a lot of damage to their water types. That said, Koga in Pokemon Yellow is a really hard battle, and I don't think Dragonair is going to be able to pull it off right now. So I'm going to opt for the training in Silph first and try the Rival after all of that. Defeating the efficient trainers in this location brings Dragonair up to level 38. I quickly stop by the healing room, and then I take on the Rival. Although I'm not convinced that Dragonair is going to be able to pull this off right now at this level. Typically, I like to be fighting him at level 40. Still though, leveling up that much wouldn't help Dragonair because it still wouldn't be one-shotting the Sandslash using Ice Beam. Will Thunderbolt one-shot the Cloyster? The answer is no. So it hits me with Aurora Beam, doing a lot of damage, and Dragonair is left with orange health for the remainder of the fight. I have to use Body Slam on the Magneton. Luckily, it can't use Thunder Shock, but unluckily, it's going to be using Tackle, Sonic Boom, or Supersonic. Two of these moves are scary, and it chooses Sonic Boom, bringing me to 19 hit points. I level up, gaining a little bit more health, and then I realized I'm speed tied with the Kadabra. It wins out on this interaction on turn 1, luckily missing a disable, giving me a chance to use Body Slam, knocking it out. All that's left is Flareon. Body Slam does less than half, it chooses Sand Attack, however this doesn't prevent Dragonair's next attack, which scores a critical hit, knocking out the Rival's final Pokemon. Alright, this is another major battle to add to the list of fights that Dragonair just barely made it through on its first attempt. Just a little bit of proof that Giovanni's Rhyhorn's bad. Yeah, look at it here. Ice Beam, one shot. Simple. No need for Bubble Beam. With Silph finished, there's two choices, Koga or Sabrina. I think Koga makes more sense right now, so let's go into his gym. I'm going to fight both of the Tamers for additional experience, and then go up against the Poison type specialist. He leads with 3 Venonats, and my hope against all of them is that I'm going to be able to two-shot using a move like Ice Beam. I have potential upside here for freezes, but after the first Venonat, which just barely goes down to 2 hits, I was not feeling confident against the next 2. Luckily, his second one just goes for Psybeam, and I am able to knock it out in only 2 turns, so that's good. The third one comes in, it still looks like my damage range is holding out, and I get a critical hit, so I do pull it off. 3 two-shots. Okay, so what type is Venomoth today? Please let me know in the comments. In this case, it goes for Double Team turn 1, followed by Toxic. Honestly, a pretty potent combo that Koga really likes to use in Pokemon Crystal. My third hit with Body Slam just barely doesn't knock it out, then it chooses Psychic and gets a critical hit and Dragonair faints. Alright, this is not going to be a close fight. This apparently is going to be a really difficult fight. I come back in, trying Body Slam for additional damage against the Venonats, but this doesn't work. I have to 3-shot the second one. And the third one only ends up being a 2-hit because I get a critical hit with Ice Beam. Alright, Venomoth, I wasn't really sure what to do here, and then all of the luck converges for me. I get a critical hit, followed by a freeze from Ice Beam. There's no way for it to defrost, so I've beaten Koga with pure luck. Okay, now that I can use Surf outside of battle, I should mention this move because Dragonair has the potential to learn it. I could, for instance, replace Body Slam right now because normal type damage is not particularly good during the Elite Four. Although, I did want to hold on to physical damage just for the champion's Alakazam. Also, I think it's worth reiterating that Surf is not that good in the late game of Pokemon Yellow. There's only one fire type for the rest of the game, which is the champion's ace. It's going to be Flareon in this case. And then all of the ground types can just be managed with Ice Beam. So why would you want Surf? It's just bloat on your moveset and it takes away physical damage, which is good against other Pokemon. Well, the reason that you'd want Surf is that Blaine has the potential to be absolutely awful. Maybe, just maybe with Dragonair, it makes sense teaching this move and then never being able to forget it for the rest of the playthrough, just to solve him. So everyone, we have reached that point in the video. This is how Blaine went. Ninetales is first. It's kind of annoying because it can hit with Flamethrower, potentially burning, use Tail Whip dropping my physical defense, or use Confuse Ray, messing Dragonair up. I'm going to take my time against it for this first battle to set up agility so that I outspeed all of his Pokemon, and also to improve my stats. After all, I am badge boosting my attack every time I use this move. The problem is, I have my defense lowered by 2 stages. Then Rapidash comes in. I am not going to be able to 2-shot with 2 badge boosts. I paralyze the Fire Horse, but this isn't enough. It goes for Stomp, and finishes Dragonair with a critical hit. Okay, let's try Blaine again. This time I get confused by the Ninetales, but it's not quite as bad. I make it to the Rapidash with half health and my defense lowered by 1 stage, so when it chooses Takedown, Dragonair once again faints. This was going quite badly, so I decided to bug out and go to Sabrina's gym next. After all, she has frail Psychic-type Pokemon, and Body Slam is going to be enough to manage them. Despite getting hit by an annoying Kinesis along the way, I am able to finish off her ace using only 2 Body Slams, so I guess back to Blaine it is now. We can't face Giovanni until he's defeated. Rapidash again, this time Takedown into Stomp gets Dragonair. In the next battle, I finally managed to knock it out using Body Slam. This is because it missed a takedown, so I got lucky. It still hits one, so I have orange health by the time the Arcanine comes in. Now, fire types do not resist ice type moves in Generation 1, so I can use Ice Beam here for decent damage and the upside to freeze, but I don't get it. Arcanine goes for takedown, however, Dragonair hangs on with 2 hit points. Alright, this is going to be it. I go for Ice Beam again, I don't get the freeze. Arcanine uses takedown, and Dragonair faints. By the way, Blaine does not have good AI. The fact that he is choosing normal moves is purely random. He could be using things like Fire Spin, Fire Blast, or Flamethrower against Dragonair and doing less damage. But I seem to be cursed, because Rapidash just stomps me into oblivion. Not once, but twice in a row. Then it gets me with takedown 2 times in a row, and to make the hopelessness really sink in, here is Dragonair losing to the Ninetales because it got hit by Confuse Ray followed by Flamethrower. When I was playing this playthrough, I was just sitting there in complete disbelief. I didn't think Blaine had the possibility to be this bad. There was always the chance that his Pokemon just spam like Tail Whip followed by Fire Spin, which misses, and then Arcanine just uses Reflect like 4 times in a row and you win. But today, that is not what happens. I reset over and over and over and over again. We are actually going to skip some of these resets because if I showed you all of them, it would take way too long. So after my reset count had grown all the way to 24, I had started to contemplate if maybe I needed to do something different. I was really resisting the choice of teaching Dragonair Surf during this fight, so instead, after getting my 25th reset, I'm going to use rare candies, boosting Dragonair from level 44 up to 53 over some damage rounding thresholds. Now, I don't like using my rare candies here either because I have a slow growth rate. That's why I really wanted to avoid using candies here, as well as teaching Surf. I'm trying to optimize things for the late game so that Dragonair is going to have a good time then. But instead, I'm just forced to use them now because Blaine is being so awful. Surprisingly, even at the higher level, I can still lose. I make it to the Arcanine, but then it gets Dragonair with 2 uses of takedown in a row. However, my suffering does have limits. If I lose one more time, I decided that I was going to go and do extra training because clearly Dragonair is just not capable of doing this right now at this level. However, in the next fight, the Arcanine misses a takedown, and because of that, I'm able to finally knock it out, earning myself the Volcano badge and a 12.5% boost to my special stat. With it, Giovanni who follows is going to be mostly easy. There are some flaws here for Dragonair. At level 53, it only has 129 speed, so it's not going to move first against the Dugtrio or the Persian. This means Dugtrio can delete me using Fissure, and it can also use Sand Attack, ruining my accuracy. Luckily for me, it goes for Fissure, which just misses because it has 30% accuracy. I one-shot with Ice Beam, Persian's next. It could be annoying with Double Team, lower my defense with Screech, which might be a problem if I'm not going to one-shot the Nidoqueen or the Nidoking. To ensure that I have as many badge boosts as possible for the remainder of the fight, I take my time here. Setting up with Agility, Persian, then using Screech is a benefit to me because it's going to give me better damage. And I think from here, I'll have what I need. Nidoqueen's next, Ice Beam, one-shots. Well, that was with a critical hit. Nidoking is next. Now, it has slightly higher special than the Nidoqueen by 4 points. Because of this, it hangs on. It chooses to go for Double Kick, which doesn't do very much damage. Dragonair survives with 7 hit points. Rhydon comes in and Ice Beam one-shots. Alright, another close battle. I can't believe this Pokemon. It has not felt good at all during this playthrough. I just want a fight where I feel dominant. Well, I guess Rival 2, 3, and 4 all felt pretty dominant, but after Rival 5, he becomes really challenging. So Rival 6 is definitely not the fight where I feel great about Dragonair's chances. Sandslash, one hit with Ice Beam. Here, I have the chance to learn Hyper Beam. Right now, I don't think I'm going to since I don't know the damage ranges well enough during the league. I could see for my second playthrough this being a useful replacement for Body Slam. Execute goes down to a single Ice Beam. Thunderbolt finishes the Cloyster in one hit. That's an improvement over Rival 5. Then for Magneton, I'm going to spam Agility. It can't use Thundershock or Thunder Wave due to my typing, so it's only going to be using Supersonic or Swift. I felt the confusion chance was worth it since Supersonic's accuracy is so trash. I might as well grab my badge boosts before the Kadabra and the Flareon. At +4, I figured this was enough, and just as I'm knocking out the Magneton, I get hit by Supersonic. Luckily, confusion expires and I knock out the Kadabra, leading to the Flareon, which doesn't really have good options against me. Because of type effectiveness, it's only ever going to choose Smog or Leer. So Rival 6 ends up being the dominant battle that I was looking for. Inside Victory Road, in preparation for the Elite Four, I battle one trainer, leveling Dragonair up to level 56. Because I burned most of my rare candies earlier on to defeat Blaine, I guess I'm just gonna have to go into Lorelei and cross my fingers. This battle has the potential to be absolutely brutal. Up first is Dewgong. Now, I want to talk about this Pokemon in detail in 1 second, but for now, let's just see my damage ranges. With a critical hit, Body Slam is going to 2-shot, but it would need crits on both turns, and I'm not going to get those, because Dewgong gets a critical hit with its Aurora Beam, and that one-shots Dragonair from full health. Next battle, the Dewgong uses Bubble Beam against Dragonair. Now, this is because of Lorelei's weird AI. I've talked about it before, but I've given some misleading statistics around it, and I want to correct those in this video. It's going to take some time to explain though, so let me just talk about what I realized during this fight. I figured out pretty quickly that if I'm not able to mimic Slowbro's Amnesia and set up to one-shot both the Jinx and the Lapras, this fight is going to be almost impossible. After all, with Body Slam, Dragonair does not knock out Jinx. It survives on a sliver of health, then uses Ice Punch and Dragonair faints. So I'm going to teach Mimic in the place of Ice Beam, since I have to give up something, and I have Blizzard as a replacement for later in the run. Okay, now let's talk about AI in Generation 1, and then more specifically Lorelei's Dewgong, because it has its own little script just for Pokemon Yellow to avoid soft locks here, where the Dewgong spams Rest over and over again against fighting types using Rage. It's kind of the developers to put this exception in, however in some cases, it really can make things more difficult. So let's find out if that's the case with Dragonair. Does Lorelei's Dewgong exception make this battle more difficult? Well, first of all, we need to understand how Lorelei is choosing her moves in the first place. She has AI Modification 2. This runs before AI Modification 3. This modification forces Pokemon to use setup moves on the second turn they're in battle. So Dewgong's going to be using Rest, and Slowbro's going to be using either Withdraw or Amnesia. The way the Pokemon decides which move it's going to end up using is through a scoring system. Initially, all of the moves start out with a neutral score, and then this value is decremented if the move is prioritized, and the value is incremented if the move is deprioritized. Then the move with the lowest score is the one that wins out and is used by the AI. So here's how it works for AI Modification 2. It's going to loop through all 4 of Dewgong's moves. It's going to see that Rest is a setup move, decrement the value, and then if the logic stopped there, Dewgong would always choose Rest on every second turn of every battle. But the logic doesn't stop there, because then AI Modification 3 runs. This is what we typically call good AI. It once again loops through every move, prioritizing stuff that is super super effective, deprioritizing stuff that is not very effective. There is some weird stuff going on here, specifically when the AI is fighting a dual type Pokemon, but I don't have time to go into that today. What this means is that Dugong is going to prioritize Aurora Beam during this check, and Rest, which is neutrally effective against Dragonair, is going to have its score unchanged. What that means is that AI Modification 2 prioritizes Rest, and AI Modification 3 prioritizes Aurora Beam, leaving Dugong with the choice between using Aurora Beam or Rest. It's never going to choose Bubble Beam, and it's never going to choose Takedown. Well, until we get to Lorelei's Dugong's specific AI modification added in Pokemon Yellow. The way this works is that when it's checking type effectiveness on each individual move, it's also going to check is the trainer Lorelei and is the Pokemon Dugong. If this is the case, then it will randomly assign neutral effectiveness to the move 40% of the time. What this means is in the past I have got the math wrong. I have said that Dugong on 2 out of 5 turns is going to view all of its moves as neutrally effective. It's actually much worse than that in a lot of scenarios. Each move that is super effective has the chance to ignore type effectiveness, but that's only a 40% roll. And if multiple moves are super effective, like say when I'm using a ground type, then both Bubble Beam and Aurora Beam are super effective. So both of them needs to pass through the roll, get the 40% chance, and then be viewed as neutrally effective in order for Dugong to randomize its moves. If just one of them gets the 60% chance to still be super effective, then Dugong will always choose that move and not randomize. So if 2 moves are super effective, then your chance for both of them to be neutral on any given turn is only 16%. Luckily for Dragonair, only 1 move is super effective. So on turns 1 and 3+, it's going to have a 40% chance of not using Aurora Beam. But on turn 2, things are a little bit more complicated once again. Aurora Beam has a 40% chance to be viewed as neutral. If this is the case, it won't be promoted, and then Rest will be the chosen move. So on turn 2, Dragonair has a 40% chance to use Rest, which is honestly not very good when I need to rely on this move to set up with agility for badge boosts. By the way, if you're wondering why I've thrown around the number of 80% chance for Rest to be used on turn 2, this is because all of the documentation around speedrunning these games are relying specifically on the fact that the player is going to be using Nidoking for this battle. I'm not using Nidoking in every one of my playthroughs, so a lot of the documentation that I originally took to be an explanation of how this mechanic always works is in fact only a specific example of how it works against Nidoking, not a generalized solution that applies to every Pokemon. Okay, so Dragonair needs to get pretty lucky here. I have a lot of resets to Lorelei, as you've already seen. Until I make it to the Slowbro, then things get a lot easier. Because of her good AI, she's always going to be using either Psychic or Amnesia on turn 1 and 3+. On turn 2, she's always going to be locked into using Amnesia. This makes things a little bit sketchy because she's going to get really set up using Amnesia, and then the Slowbro can do a lot of damage with Psychic. But provided I get lucky and it just keeps spamming Amnesia, which is what happens here, I am going to be able to knock it out, and then with Max Special, I should be able to take care of the Jinx with badge boosts on Body Slam, and then Thunderbolt to one-hit the Lapras. The only way this could fall apart is a critical hit. And yeah, I get one against the Lapras, so it survives. It uses Blizzard and Dragonair feints. So back to grinding Lorelei to hopefully get through this sometime soon. I think this is the best strategy. I don't think it makes any sense to level up more for this fight. I just need to wait until I get lucky with Amnesia and Thunderbolt. And I do make it back to the Lapras after only one more reset. So will I get another critical hit? And the answer is no, the Lapras goes down this time. To ensure that the next fight is as easy as it should be, I teach Blizzard in the place of Body Slam. I didn't want to give up Mimic at this point, so I'm going to go without physical damage from here. I want Blizzard so that I can one-shot the Onix and not have to Mimic Dig, because that's kind of slow and Blizzard just seems better in general. However, things end up being kind of sketchy here. I miss a hit against the Hitmonlee. It crits me, then Blizzard knocks it out. I move on to the Onix and I one-shot, but I'm out of Blizzard PP by the time the Machamp comes in. So I'm going to have to use Thunderbolt. He uses his typical X-Defend, doing absolutely nothing. I take his Machamp down to low health, then it chooses Submission and Dragonair feints. Okay, well, I really don't know what to say. This run has been absolutely awful so far, and apparently that's just going to continue. Luckily for me, I do not lose here for a second time in a row, but that's because I froze the Machamp. I guess luck to get by the hiker. Cool. Agatha's next. This is usually a pretty brutal fight, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to keep Mimic around. Then I can steal Substitute from the first Gengar, set up with agility, and hopefully make it through the rest of her team with greater ease. Although, it's not actually very simple. By the time I'm knocking out the Golbat, which by the way survives a single Blizzard, I have red health left over. so I'm going into the Haunter in a really bad position, and Blizzard is not able to two-shot. Arbok's next. It uses Glare turn 1, paralyzing me, which is sometimes an advantage against the Gengar because then you can't get hit by Hypnosis, although in this case, it breaks my substitute, uses Confuse Ray, and Dragonair hits itself, so that's one reset to Agatha. Alright, I'm feeling really done with this middle stage dragon Pokemon. This has not been fun so far. There have been like 4 battles where I felt dominant. It was all against the rival, and mostly just because his team was incompetent against me during those specific fights. And I don't think that's going to be the case for the champion. He's usually extremely strong during that battle. But I gotta make it through Agatha. How am I going to win here? Is it going to be another freeze? Well, it doesn't appear like that's going to be the case. I make it to the final Gengar without paralysis this time, but I have to 4-shot using Blizzard, and I don't freeze before I run out of PP. I have low health. Luckily, I was able to reestablish my substitute, so the Gengar isn't able to get me. I was so lucky here that it didn't choose Hypnosis. She switched out her Arbok earlier on, so it comes back in, but one Thunderbolt's able to take care of it, so that's Agatha. Before Lance, I want to make sure that I don't level up during this fight, so I'm going to use one rare candy to go up to 59. Then I'll be able to badge boost with agility. Gyarados is first. Of course I can go for Thunderbolt here in just one shot. From there, I'm not sure if Blizzard is going to be able to one-shot the Dragonairs, so I want to play a little bit safe against them. I'm going to knock out the first one right away, and then against the second one, I go for a single agility, ensuring that I'll outspeed the Aerodactyl. I think I played this risky though. I should have set up on the first Dragonair because it's never going to use Thunderwave or Thunderbolt because of good AI. The second Dragonair though is going to choose Ice Beam, so it could have frozen Dragonair. Luckily, it didn't. Aerodactyl comes in, I outspeed, Blizzard one-shots, and of course Dragonite is easy to take care of with my Ice-type move. This battle felt dominant. That's nice. It's raising my spirits just a little bit before the champion, who is typically in Pokemon Yellow the most difficult trainer in the game. Sandslash is first, and it gives Dragonair an opportunity to get access to a physical move. I mimic Earthquake, and then I knock it out using Blizzard. I have just over half health from here, but provided Earthquake one-shots the Alakazam, I should be okay. Unfortunately though, I didn't take time to set up against the Sandslash, so I'm not faster, and Alakazam hits me with Psychic. Also, Earthquake doesn't do enough damage. Next, I get really lucky. The Alakazam misses a Kinesis, and I knock it out using Thunderbolt. Executor's next. I freeze against it, and two-shot with my Ice-type move. And then for Magneton, Earthquake doesn't one-shot. Of course it doesn't. This thing loves to live. It just goes for Screech though. Its only attacking move that can hit Dragonair is Swift, so I guess it badge boosted me, which is convenient for the Cloyster that's next. As long as I can one-shot with Thunderbolt, I think I've got this. But I can't. Cloyster survives. It goes for Ice Beam, and Dragonair faints. Okay, I got really lucky in that fight, but I still didn't win. I think the best word to describe how I played the next fight was irrationally and reckless. I decide not to mimic anything from the Sandslash or to set up with agility. I just spam Blizzard, knocking it out. Then for Alakazam, I just keep spamming Blizzard, basically hoping that I'm gonna get a freeze. I don't along the way. I have my accuracy altered by Kinesis, and then I knock out the Psychic type. I continue playing recklessly, attacking Executor, mimicking Hypnosis, and then finishing it off. Now I need to use Hypnosis after my accuracy's been dropped, so I have a 39% chance for this move to hit on any given turn. Surprisingly, the Magneton isn't that scary, so taking my time against it isn't the end of the world, although Thunderbolt as damage is just not good, because I've run out of Blizzard uses. So I have to spam Hypnosis, put it to sleep, set up agility to badge boost myself, and then use Thunderbolt to knock out the electric type, which really doesn't feel good. Although, I'm in a decent position, provided Thunderbolt is going to hit against the Cloyster. It does hit, and with badge boosts, I have enough damage. Flareon is last. It has two moves that it can use due to my typing, Reflect or Quick Attack. Quick Attack is doing okay damage, but not enough. And Thunderbolt is doing roughly 1/3 per hit. So over 3 turns, I knock out the champion's ace, and finally, at long last, after endless frustration, Dragonair clocks in with its time. 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 21 seconds, with 36 resets and 6 blackouts. That's a total of 42 faults. It beat the game at level 61, with a game time of 3 hours and 41 minutes. I was really not looking forward to coming back and having to optimize Dragonair, so I put off doing its second run for a couple months. I played the first one back in February, and I came back recently now in May and played my second run with Dragonair. Here's how it went. First of all, in the early game, I really wanted to just fight the mandatory bug catcher and then do the blackout training on the Diglett trainer. Turns out this is kind of sketchy, and I lost a couple runs losing to him without getting any experience from the blackouts. Also, Churro is being really noisy right now. Anyways, the more safe strategy is to just fight bug catchers in the forest. I can fight the first guy who has 2 Caterpie, as well as the second guy who has a Caterpie and a Metapod. Defeating these two gives me far better ranges against the Diglett, and then I can black out to him only 3 times, because this is all that's needed. For Brock, I only need level 10 for the Geodude. Using Leer 3 times improves my damage range to the point that Wrap does 2 damage per hit, which is all that's needed. This can still get a little bit sketchy if Wrap misses and the Geodude lands a tackle, because then Dragonair is on low health. However, I can play contextually for the rest of the fight. I healed before Brock after defeating the Junior trainer, which does waste a little bit more time, but then I have enough PP with Wrap to just attack the Onix without using any Leers to lower its defense to do 2 damage per hit. Now, using Leer is the faster strategy because then Wrap's going to knock out the Onix quicker. However, I prefer the Wrap strategy if my health is extremely low and I don't think I'm going to be able to get off 5 Leers, which is what's required to do 2 damage per hit when using Wrap. Making these small changes in the early game gives me a much better Brock split going into the rest of the game. 5 minutes and 39 seconds instead of 6 minutes and 56 seconds. That's 1 minute and 17 seconds faster at just the first gym leader. I think Dragonair is set up for a very successful second run. At least it's going to get a much better time than my first run, but believe me, the majority of that time is going to be saved at Blaine, because I have a much better strategy for him this time. Although if you like consistency, you're not going to like what it is. On Route 3, I don't want to backtrack to the Pokemon Center, so I'm just going to use Leer here to lower the Pokemon's defense stats so that I can use Wrap enough times. The only caveat here is that I need to be very careful against poison types which can poison Dragonair, because the passive damage stacks up every turn that Wrap hits, and that increases too much risk. So typically against Pokemon like this Weedle, I'm going to attack first turn to prevent it from ever hitting me. Inside Mount Moon, teach Water Gun, teach Bide in the place of Leer. Then throughout the remainder of the cave, I'm not going to fight any optional trainers, fighting only the 2 mandatory battles at the end. But here I do save before Jesse and James. The reason is, this battle's actually pretty brutal when you don't do optional training. The Meowth can do so much damage with Bite, and to play around it, I use Thunder Wave turn 1 to cut its speed so that then I can wrap it down, without it using multiple turns of Bite or lowering my attack with Growl. Also, I used Wrap against the Coughing since my health was pretty low by this point in the fight, and I was trying to prevent it from using Smog and poisoning me. Okay, Misty, I'm using Bide here. It can still be really sketchy, and this is a perfect example of it being sketchy. I hit with 2 Bides, bringing it down to low red health. However, I should have gone for Water Gun for increased damage, but I'm just using Wrap, and it's chipping away, doing almost no damage. I am so lucky the Starmie did not use Tackle and knock Dragonair out. Anyways, I make it through Misty, and I've further increased my time advantage over the first playthrough. I'm now 1 minute and 42 seconds ahead. Everything on the SSN, as well as with Surge, is essentially the same as it was last time. Between Cerulean City and Celadon City, I'm not going to be running both Bubble Beam and Thunderbolt on Dragonair's set. This does slow down the battles against the Slowpoke trainers inside of Rock Tunnel, but that's worth it because having Wrap for later is going to give us a much bigger advantage. Once I finish off the self-destructing hiker, then I'm free to teach Thunderbolt in Bubble Beam's place and I can proceed with the mid-game. Now, Zealous Pawn told me that fighting Erika first and then going to the hideout is a little bit more efficient in terms of walking. After listening to him explain why, I do think that's true, so I should have done things this way, but instead muscle memory took over. I did the hideout first instead. I pick up a PP up here. I'm going to grab all 3 for this playthrough. I'll mention why later on. If you skip all of them, it saves 13.5 seconds. Both Zealous Pawn and I thought that this would be a little bit more. I guessed 23 seconds and he guessed somewhere between 20 and 30 seconds. Turns out it's lower than that, so the time investment's not that much. And I think having more uses of Blizzard will be critical later on. Let's talk about Erika. Erika is an annoying fight. If I'm not poisoned like I was last time, she's manageable for Dragonair. After all, we resist the grass type moves, so Weepinbell and Gloom are both only going to be using acid. I'm using Wrap here. I can bring them down around half health and then knock them out with Body Slam. This kind of is sketchy, as you can see here. Weepinbell does decent damage with each one of its acids, but in the end, Erika's not that difficult that I want to be delaying her for later on. If you're wondering why I'm not using Ice Beam here, it's really simple. I can't unlearn any of my current moves. I need Thunderbolt until the end of the game, same with Agility. I need Body Slam throughout the mid game, and Wrap is going to solve Koga, who's coming up next, after I complete all of Pokemon Tower. By the way, I critical hit both of Agatha Jr.'s Ghastlies, so that was a quick and easy fight. I could have had a reset there. On Cycling Road, 3 trainers. The Wheezing guy, this trainer that I very rarely fight who has a Mankey and a Primeape, Zealouspawn added him in because he gives the perfect amount of experience to get to level 34 after we defeat the biker boss, as well as the 2 mandatory trainers inside of Koga's gym. Then with 6 rare candies, I can go up to level 40 before fighting Koga. I'm gonna get my first reset here. This battle overall is extremely difficult. Even if we level up higher to 45, 48, 50, we're still two-shotting most of the Pokemon, if not all of the Pokemon here, so using Wrap to chip down the Venonats and then Thunderbolt or Body Slam to knock them out ends up being the more reliable and consistent approach. I'm also using Agility to ensure that I outspeed the Venomoth at the end of the battle, which takes 3 turns to knock out when using Body Slam. This is the next section of the run where I do training. I'm going to fight 5 trainers on Route 21. Psych, the 2 Tentacruel trainers beside him, the Zealouspawn swimmer, and then the trainer that's immediately to the left of him. He has a Poliwhirl. I'm just kind of calling him Poliwhirl guy right now because I am starting to fight him in more runs. His experience yields are pretty good after all. There's one more optional trainer in this section of the game, and that's this scientist inside of Pokemon Mansion. The reason I'm fighting him is so that I have enough experience to level up to 43 so that I can use 3 rare candies. This theoretically is to dodge Raticate encounters inside of the mansion, but I had to backtrack into the mansion to fight him again to ensure that my experience was at the proper point because I forgot to fight him before jumping down to the floor below in my first run through the mansion just because of muscle memory. At level 46, after 3 rare candies, the rival in Silph is quite easy to manage. Ice Beam for the Sandslash and Thunderbolt for the Cloyster guarantee 1-hits. I have to 2-hit the Magneton, and then from there 1-hit Kadabra with Body Slam and 2-hit Flareon. Because Blaine was so awful and we're currently in Saffron City, fighting Sabrina next makes the most sense. I use Agility just once here on the Kadabra to ensure that I outspeed the Alakazam that follows. And speaking of outspeeding, look at Blaine. We're level 48 and we do move first against the Ninetales, but not the Rapidash and the Arcanine. So here's my strategy for him the second time around. We have Horn Drill, which I have taught in the place of Ice Beam. I am going to, on Zealouspawn's advice, Horn Drill the Ninetales and the Arcanine. I'll be using either Thunderbolt or Body Slam to knock out the Rapidash. It is by far his least scary Pokemon. And since I'm leveling up after the Ninetales, I don't want to badge boost at the beginning of the fight. What this essentially means is that anytime I take a reset to Blaine, it's always against the Ninetales at the beginning or a very unlucky Arcanine later into the fight. In my previous playthrough, there were so many runs against Blaine where I would reset against the Arcanine, wasting a bunch of time, but using Horn Drill here is going to prevent that. This strategy ends up being so superior against Blaine. I clock in with a split that is 14 minutes and 4 seconds faster than my previous run. And now I want to show you how I manage my bag beautifully. I open my bag just outside of the Pokemon Center in Viridian City. I'm going to teach Blizzard and then use all 3 PP ups on Blizzard, spamming A through all of this dialogue, which then activates the bike, which allows me to move over to the Viridian City gym a little bit faster. I also want to mention this is why Ice Beam was in slot 1, as well as Horn Drill and now Blizzard. It's so that I have this fast teaching mechanic whenever I open my bag. I don't want to have to scroll down to other moves in my moveset because it can introduce player error with accidental clicks, and it also slows you down because going at 4 times speed and being accurate is just not really possible within these menus. Okay, let's talk about Giovanni because he's really awful. At level 50, I have decent damage ranges after using Agility 3 times against the Nidoqueen and the Nidoking. But at level 49, this fight is really challenging and not recommended. This is essentially the minimum battle that Dragonair should be getting through this section of the game. The strategy is Agility turn 1 against the Dugtrio so that it can't use things like Fissure after the first turn. Then set up 2 times on the Persian. It can get awful, knocking you out with Slash, but if I do make it through the Persian, then the Nidoqueen, Nidoking, and Rhydon are all easy provided Blizzard doesn't miss. I had only 1 reset here just because the Persian knocked me out, but after that, I make it through on my next attempt. Overall, didn't waste that much time against Giovanni. There are two different strategies for Rival 6. There's the strategy that I'm going for, which is suboptimal, setting up agility just once, and then there is the optimal strategy, setting up agility twice. Doing this gives a 96.4% chance to two-shot the Magneton, which you see I can't do here because I only set up one agility, and you also get a guaranteed 2-hit on the Flareon at the end of the battle. Overall, this fight is really easy for Dragonair, and you don't have to play it that way, as you can see from this win that I get, even with the suboptimal strategy. Alright, inside Victory Road, we need to be incredibly precise, fighting only this black belt. He is going to line up Dragonair's experience perfectly for the Elite Four. No more rare candies until right before the champion. Lorelei is largely luck-based. First turn agility, second turn attack the Dugong. It has to go for rest. If it doesn't, just reset right away because it's not worth wasting time. So on turn 2, I have a 30% chance that it's going to go for Aurora Beam and a 70% chance it's going to go for rest. Overall, really favorable odds. And speaking of odds, my damage range against the Cloyster is not very good, but I still like Dragonair's position in this battle. Because it had to knock the Dugong out with 2 uses of Thunderbolt, it was only able to set up 2 turns of agility, giving it roughly a 30% chance to knock out the Cloyster in 1 hit. However, the damage range is so good that Lorelei is likely to use Super Potions, increasing my chances to make it by her first 2 Pokemon. Also, I can't level Dragonair up to level 53, which would have a much better damage range, but there's a consequence for that later on. If I was level 53, then Thunderbolt would have a 71% chance to knock out the Cloyster in 1 hit. So that's a much more favorable range, but again, we can't do that. Once I make it to the Slowbro, obviously Mimic Amnesia, then set up. By the way, Lorelei Gen 1 missed a Psychic on turn 1 with Slowbro here, and because of that, I take a very easy victory over her. Okay, so Zealous Pawn told me that he lost to Bruno when playing with Dragonair, and Bruno is actually kind of scary for Dragonair. Luckily for me, his Onix just uses Slam 3 times in a row, which is a terrible move. He becomes scary only if the Onix goes for Screech early on. By the way, the Hitmonlee's high jump kick does between 42 and 50% damage with a normal hit before your defense is altered. It's really scary, and Dragonair cannot one-shot unless it sets up all of its agilities. Luckily for me though, in this playthrough at least, I make it by Bruno with no resets. Okay, it's time for Agatha. Let's talk about this one. Zealous Pawn and I debated this at length as to what was the right strategy. There are 2 options that seem like they're the best. By the way, this is the fight that I used the PP ups for. I wanted to have as many uses of Blizzard as is possible, just because if I freeze her Pokemon, then the whole fight becomes significantly easier. Also, Blizzard does better damage than Thunderbolt, so you can knock out her Pokemon like the final Gengar a little bit more quickly. The 2 strategies we were contemplating is mimicking Substitute from the Gengar at the beginning of the battle, or mimicking Hypnosis from the Haunter, and then using Hypnosis to put both the Haunter and the Gengar to sleep. In the end, we both agreed that Hypnosis is the superior strategy. You take less attacks from both the Haunter and the final Gengar, which are the really scary Pokemon. If they put you to sleep with Hypnosis, then Dream Eater does massive damage. They can also compound on top of the status condition another one with Confuse Ray, which is always awful. The final Gengar has Psychic, and it can also put you to sleep with its own Hypnosis, and then you can snooze for like 7 turns. Gen 1's awful, Sleep's great, so mimic Hypnosis from the Haunter, put it to sleep, knock it out, knock out the Arbok, and then knock out the final Gengar. By the way, I set up at the beginning of the battle just to ensure that I would still be moving first against most Pokemon, even if I get paralyzed. Zealous Pawn said this battle was awful, and his 4th playthrough time with Dragonair was 55 minutes and 40 seconds. So that's what I was trying to beat in this run. And I started to expect that this run would do great things, because I beat Agatha on my first attempt. No resets here against what was supposed to be the most difficult trainer in the entire run. Now, upon defeating her Gengar, Dragonair levels up to 55, where it can learn Hyper Beam. This is the reason we can't go into Lorelei at a higher level, because then Hyper Beam will be learned before Agatha, and obviously it's useless for that fight, and the move we want to replace is Mimic, because it's not really useful against Lance or the champion. And having Hyper Beam, which doesn't need to recharge in Generation 1, is going to give us much better damage ranges against both Lance and the champion. Going into Lance, I make a mistake. I use Thunderbolt instead of setting up with Agility against the Gyarados. Because of this, I don't have enough damage to knock it out. I take a little bit of extra damage, and then the Dragonair gets me later in the fight. Frustrating. In the end, the better choice is just set up Agilities, then sweep his team. Thunderbolt can one-shot Gyarados then. Blizzard or Hyper Beam can knock out both of the Dragonairs, which is why we considered skipping the PP ups, because you don't need that much Blizzard PP. Well, outside of the Agatha battle, and it is also a little bit helpful against the champion who's next. Also, setting up fully with Agility does ensure that Dragonair is likely to one-shot the Aerodactyl when it uses Thunderbolt for increased accuracy. Okay, let's talk about the champion. This one can be played contextually. Turn 1 agility on the Sandslash. This ensures that Dragonair moves first against the Alakazam. It also increases my defenses so the Sandslash doesn't do quite as much damage with its attacks. Now, if turn 1 it goes for Slash or Earthquake, the better choice is to just knock it out with Blizzard, one-shot the Alakazam with Hyper Beam, and then move on to the Executor where I can complete my setup. But if the Sandslash goes for Poison Sting, misses a Fury Swipes, or potentially gets a non-crit with Slash, which is possible, it's just a 1 in 256 chance, then the better strategy is to continue setup against the Sandslash. So I can just attack the Executor, knock it out in 2 hits, and hopefully avoid it using Hypnosis. The more turns I take against it, the more likely it is to put me to sleep once and then stomp or barrage away, wasting a bunch of time, potentially leaving Dragonair in a very bad position by the time the Magneton comes out. Now, this is where damage ranges are also very precise. The Magneton needs to use 1 turn of Screech. It's going to be alternating between Swift and this move. Once it does, it badge boosts Dragonair enough that Thunderbolt will one-shot the following Cloyster, and Hyper Beam will one-shot the final Flareon. There are downsides here. Screech can miss, as you see right here, causing a reset. Another downside is the fact that once you knock out the Magneton, you will one-shot the Cloyster but have very little health left over, like this attempt, where Dragonair goes into the Flareon with 2 HP. Because of type effectiveness, the Flareon is only rolling Reflect or Quick Attack, and in this case it picks Quick Attack, so I lose again. This fight is really awful. There are just so many ways to lose. Sandslash doing awesome damage at the beginning if you choose to set up against it, Executor using Hypnosis, Magneton missing Screech or hitting too many Swifts in a row. Cloyster could potentially get you if you try to make it by the Magneton without Screech, but we're not doing that, so it's one of the least impactful Pokemon in the battle. Then at the very end, Flareon can just get you if your health is too low. But if health isn't too low, then Dragonair is able to one-shot the Flareon using Hyper Beam, and that's that. In my second run with Dragonair, I get a time of 56 minutes and 20 seconds with 14 resets, 3 blackouts at level 59 with a game time of 3 hours and 22 minutes. This is 15 minutes and 1 second faster than my first run, so I am really happy with this time for Dragonair. Still, in terms of tier list ranking, it's not a very good Pokemon. It's not even a good middle evolution. It's really just a mid-middle evolution. Poliwhirl is currently chilling in 3rd place overall in the tier list with a time of 37 minutes and 56 seconds. Editor Scott here, I actually completely forgot Haunter in all of the next voiceover, so just add 1 to all of the numbers that I call out here. Haunter is in fact in 2nd place when we consider middle evolutions. For middle evolutions, Wartortle is in 2nd place with a time of 44 minutes and 19 seconds. Ivysaur is in 3rd with a time of 45 minutes and 25 seconds. Weepinbell breaks the combo of the starters, getting 4th place with 46 minutes and 41 seconds. And Charmeleon's in 5th place with a time of 47 minutes and 38 seconds. Still a time significantly better than Dragonair's time. And rubbing salt in the wound, Kadabra has a time of 54 minutes and 34 seconds, but I will remind you it does not start with a move that deals damage. It has to do the early game with Teleport and Kinesis. Dragonair is still slower than it. Today, it earns itself the 2nd place in the E tier, just barely being beaten out by a Pokemon like Jolteon, an electric type, which are generally not very good in Pokemon Yellow, and it's ahead of Pokemon like Clefairy, a first stage Pokemon, which I'm sure will do better when I re-rank it in the future. Also, Pokemon like Muck. Muck was not good. You know who else wasn't good? Scyther, Executor, Electrode, all of the really bad first stage Pokemon. I guess Dragonair was at least able to beat out Gloom and Pidgeotto, the worst middle evolutions. Before we end today, let's talk about the Professor Oak battle. I'm going up against the Blastoise team because I figured it would be the most difficult for Dragonair. I have super effective damage in the form of Blizzard against both Venusaur and Charizard, whereas Thunderbolt is a little bit less good against the Blastoise. The fight starts off okay. I can set up with agility and badge boost a lot here because of my slow growth rate. I'm not going to have a mid-battle level up until the very end. Then I can use Blizzard to knock out the Executor in 2 hits. Luckily it doesn't go for Hypnosis. Arcanine does a lot of damage with Takedown, leaving Dragonair on only red health. But then Blastoise comes in after I Hyper Beam the Arcanine, and it just chooses Skull Bash, so I knock it out for free using Thunderbolt. I thought this meant Dragonair had won, but guess what? The Gyarados, when taking 4 times damage from Thunderbolt, Thunderbolt is just too high of a level, so it survives, uses Dragon Rage, and knocks out Dragonair. So how do I win this? Well, it just uses Dragon Rage again. Because of that, I had a little bit more health this time around. I survived with 14 hit points, used 2 Thunderbolts, and Gyarados goes down. Pure luck here at the end of the run. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much. It means the world to me and my team. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video.